You are visiting us for the first time. My name's Darren. I'm the Bible teacher here at Life Point. And at the moment we're doing a short series called Listen to Win. This is a series in which we're acknowledging that sometimes it's just really hard to get through to people. Right? You're trying to get through to your wife. Trying to get through to your husband. Trying to get through to your kids, to your customers, to your colleagues. And it just feels like banging your head off a brick wall. So for a few weeks in church, we're exploring some ideas, some potential solutions that will help us communicate better by listening. Right? I want to start today by showing you the Dos Equis man. You probably remember these commercials featuring the most interesting gentleman in the world. A dapper, salt and pepper-haired man whose business card simply said, "I'll call you." Whose achievements included teaching canaries the art of falconry, and who has a sandwich named after him on every continent, including Antarctica. This fascinating gentleman is only a fantasy, but in real life, interesting people like him do exist. For example, prior to his premature death, Anthony Bourdain travelled the world in search of exotic food. He won Emmys, wrote best-selling books, started a publishing company, wrote comics for Marvel. You're suave, you're confident. People pay you millions of dollars to travel the world eating and drinking. Interesting, give me your life. You might recognize this guy as Brian May, the former lead guitarist of supergroup Queen. But what you might not know is that in addition to being a member of one of history's biggest bands, Brian May has a PhD in astrophysics, spends his spare time doing research into astronomy. He recently published a book called Bang, The Complete History of the Universe, that was universally welcomed as making a valuable contribution to science. You're a rock star and a scientist. How interesting are you? You've all seen this man. Elon Musk's life is so interesting that he became the inspiration for Marvel's Iron Man franchise. Like the movie hero he inspired, he thinks up seemingly impossible inventions and then makes them happen. After selling PayPal for the now seemingly cheap sum of $1.5 billion, he started a space transportation company, builds luxury electric cars, conceptualized high-speed rail travel between New York and LA, and drives a car from a James Bond film, and he now aspires to colonize Mars. I'm sorry to break this to you, but there are people in this world who are slightly more interesting than you are. And it makes us wish, from time to time, that our lives were more interesting than they were. And in our own little modest ways, we do try to come across as more interesting than we actually are. Because we think it matters to be interesting. Outlets like Marie Claire and Cosmopolitan tap into this. They regularly publish articles with titles like "How to be interesting on Instagram," "How to be more fascinating on Facebook." At the moment in church, we're talking about how we can get through to people. People who are hard to reach. And what I want to teach you this morning is that if you want to get through to someone, don't try to be interesting. Just be interested. Let me say that again. Don't try to be interesting. Stop trying so hard to be interesting. Try instead to be a little bit more interested. Interesting people are just interesting. But that's all they are. But it's the ones who take an interest, the ones who show genuine interest in our lives, those are the ones who reach us, who matter, and who make a difference. In the Bible, it says that fools do not delight in competence, but only in disclosing their hearts. Look at part B of that sentence. Isn't that just our world today? I bet you know people like this. People who really don't care about what's going on in your life. They only care about what's going on in theirs. They want to show you what they're up to on social media. They want to tell you the things they're working on, what they're up to, what they're selling, or where they're going. And basically, every time you meet them, it's an opportunity for them to download information about them to you. And in the parts of the conversation where you're speaking, they're not really listening. They're just thinking about what it is they want to tell you next. And it doesn't work, does it? Those people don't reach you. I'll demonstrate why at the end. But first, Bible teaching. In his letter to the church in Ephesus, the Apostle Paul says to the Christians, "You were taught, with regard to your former way of life, to put off your old self." Now, when this sentence talks about putting off, it's using the language of the changing room. In the ancient world, to talk about a person who put off his clothes was obviously to talk about a person who got changed from one outfit into another outfit. And as you can see in this sentence, the change that this sentence refers to is not that of outfits, but that of lives. Question: do you ever wish that you could unzip your life, step out of it, and get into another one? I can tell by your facial expressions that the answer to that is absolutely. Only every day do I wish that. Sign me up, zip me out, I'll get another life tomorrow. That sort of is what this sentence is saying. When we talk about the life you have and the faith you have and Jesus and all the many ways that you're trying to get through to those people that you desperately need to get through to, the suggestion of the Bible here is that you can be a new person who does things in a new and a better way. This person, in the words of the next sentence, is a person who, look at what it says, is made new in the attitude of your mind. A person who puts on now the new self, created to be like God, righteous and holy. Now, when the Bible talks about putting something off and then putting something else on, it is, as you can see, using verbs. The Bible is saying then that if you're going to take a step towards something better, something different, something that works, then you're going to have to get some verbs going in your life. I'm sorry. But your life in the worldview of the Bible is your responsibility. And if you're going to make it work, however rubbish it happens to be at the moment, you're going to have to be the one who makes it work. You're going to have to take some action. You're going to have to do something. You're going to have to dig deep and find it within yourself the resources that you need to turn the corner you need to turn. And notice that this action begins for the apostle in the mind. The Bible is saying to us, guys, it starts here. Yeah, you're maybe living wrong. Yeah, you're maybe doing it wrong. Yeah, you're maybe doing it inefficiently. But the reason for that is you're not thinking straight. Start thinking straight, and you'll start finding better answers and better solutions. So he's saying then, get rid of one way of thinking that doesn't work, and adopt another way of thinking that does. So may I ask you an honest question, if I may step out of the text for a moment. Does it ever tire you? I mean, do you ever get tired of trying so hard to get through to that person? And it doesn't matter how hard you try, it doesn't matter how sincerely you say it, it doesn't matter how many different ways you think of saying it, it doesn't matter how hard you say it, they just never seem to listen. Whatever it is you're trying to say, they seem incapable of hearing it. Can I ask you a follow-up question? do you think that maybe you're selfish? I mean, deep down, do you really care about what they want and how they feel and what they're going through? Do you really care about that? Or do you really just care about communicating the things that you want, that you feel, that you're going through? What is your communication? What is the struggle? That you're not listening to what they're going through, or that they're not hearing what you want to get into their head? Are you fundamentally selfish? Listening is hard. Really listening to what another person wants and needs and feels, that's difficult work. But the better you listen, the better you'll be heard. So what the Bible is asking you to do here is to begin the process of thinking better. Because thinking better is always the prelude to doing better. So get rid of the one way of thinking that doesn't work and get another way that does. And notice how it goes on. He says one of the first adjustments that we have to make with regard to our thought processes is that we should all put off falsehood. And I mention that because when we find ourselves in a situation in which we're really struggling to get through to someone and it's profoundly frustrating, we are often also in a situation where there's a lot of hurt in the mix, a lot of emotion, a lot of heightened feelings. And where there are those things, there are almost always criticisms. And criticism, it seems to me, is the result of pain. I believe that hurt people hurt people. And that's why it's important that we deal with our hurt. I think that the reason they hurt you so well is because they themselves are damaged somehow and never dealt with the damage. And there's so much insecurity and hurt and inadequacy in them that they respond to that by hurting you in return. They feel so bad about their own lives that they transpose some of that unhappiness onto you. And when they don't listen to you, it's sometimes their way of punishing you. Another thing I've noticed about criticism is that it's usually a misguided attempt to validate yourself. When they say those things to you, they're trying to deal with their own flaws and their own self-image. And when they shut you out of their life the way that they're shutting you out, it's not really about you. It's about them. Something in them that they never dealt with. And the bizarre thing is that we allow their dysfunction to inform our understanding of who we are. And I think then that part of the falsehood that we are to put off in our thinking is the incorrect self-image and the incorrect self-worth that we have allowed someone else's dysfunction to give to us. The part of the Bible that we're reading through this morning is written to a group of people whom it calls the saints in Ephesus. It actually says that. Chapter 1, verse 1 of this particular bit of the Bible says, this is written to the saints in Ephesus. And we know from other bits of the Bible that these so-called saints in Ephesus were by no means saintly. Not by any stretch. They had issues in the bedroom, issues in the home, issues in the workplace, issues in the church. I mean, their lives were messy places, lived in a messy place. And this letter says, yeah, all right, we'll talk about the mess. And we'll talk about the issues and the dysfunction. But before we talk about what's going on, let's talk about who you are. You are saints. No. You see, we don't feel that way. We feel like failures. We feel like a mess. We feel like a train wreck. We feel like losers. Yeah, okay, welcome to the human race. But those things that you're going through, however messy, they are not who you are. The Bible has a very different view of who you are. You are someone whom God loves so much that he sent his Son to die on the cross for you. In him you have a future that is better than your past. You are valued. You are secure. Criticism and fear create doubt. Am I good enough? Will I make it? Is this because of me? And in the Bible, fear and doubt must always give way to hope and belief. It's not really about you when they shut you out. So don't allow the things that they are going through to inform your self-image of who you are. It's something in them, their hurt, their fear, their insecurity. The phrase "put off" that he uses in this sentence specifically has to do with taking off cumbersome outer clothing so that you can do hard physical work. So, for example, if a person in the ancient world was chopping wood, one of the first things they would do would be to take off their long flowing outer robes, because those would restrict the full movement of the arms. So the idea here then is that lies, not just the ones that we speak, but the ones that are spoken to us by others, and the ones that get lodged in our own heads, in our own self-image, those lies, those falsehoods, really restrict us from living the life that God wishes for us to live. So the advice then of the Bible is quite harsh. Be ruthless. Be tough with the falsehoods, the other people's dysfunction says about you in your own head. Now, moving on, when we talk about not getting through to people, frustrating as it is, we often end up with anger. Before we get into what the text says, is that something that you can relate to? Do you ever feel angry in any way because they don't listen? Why are so many of you looking at your spouses right now? Interestingly, notice, please, this sentence is written as an imperative. It actually says in first century Greek, "Be angry!" Exclamation mark. But just not in a sinful way. Finally, a bit of the Bible I can do. First bit, be angry. It's good. The reason I find this interesting is because we often operate under a misguided notion that if we take it and keep on taking it, eventually it will get better. Eventually they'll come around. Eventually things will change. And this is our answer. Just to take it, and take it, and take it, and take it. This is a personal question, but are you in a situation where you are just taking it? Criticisms, I'll take it. Being ignored, I'll take it. Being used, I'll take it. Being abused, I'll take it. Being treated unfairly, I'll take it. And if I just keep on taking it, eventually it will change for the better. Listen, you don't have to take it. There is nothing particularly virtuous or Christian about allowing someone else to spoil your life. Sometimes the Christian thing to do is to stand up and say, "I'm sorry, but no. No. I'm not taking this anymore. Enough is enough. You've pushed me. You will push me no further. You've tested me. You will test me no more. You thought you could toss me around with impunity. You will now see how wrong that you were." Do you love yourself enough to get angry about the wrongs that are being done to you? That's what this sentence is saying. Do you love yourself enough Do you love what's right enough to get angry about the wrong way you're being treated? Because if that is so, then the command of the Bible in verse 25 is be angry. Like, find a spine, will you? Be angry. And I'd be all right if the sentence stopped there, but he has to say not in a sinful way. And now I'm all out of ideas. He goes on, he says, even though right anger is right, it can still lead to wrong consequences. And so notice he says, please don't let the sun go down while you're angry, and don't give the devil a foothold in your life. Sound advice, you know as well as I do, that anger, it can mess things up. So the Bible is saying you ought to get angry. Puzzling why you wouldn't really, given what's going on. Anger is sometimes useful. Anger is sometimes productive. But it must be handled with care, because too much anger that stays around for too long ceases to be useful and productive and instead becomes dark and damaging. So let's say, for example, that someone in your life did something they ought not to have done a while ago. It was wrong. Absolutely. They shouldn't have done it. They shouldn't have said it. It shouldn't have happened. But they did do it. They did say it. It did happen. And you are 100% right and 100% Christian to be furious about that. No question. But the irony of your situation this morning is that that person who a month ago said what they shouldn't have said and did what they shouldn't have done, this morning they're probably not thinking about you. They're probably not thinking about what they shouldn't have said and what they shouldn't have done. They could care less. They're probably still in bed having a long lie. And here you are, thinking about what they shouldn't have said and what they shouldn't have done. It's like a weight around your neck. And it holds you back and it robs you of happiness. There comes a time when it's time to free yourself of what happened. And I'm sorry to say this, I know it sounds uncaring, but until you do that, you will always be the prisoner of what happened. What happened has already hurt you in the past. What is the sense in allowing it to hurt you in the present and permitting it to rob you of a future that could very well be amazing? You know, we sometimes go through life and think, bad things might happen tomorrow, and they might, but you know what? Good things might happen tomorrow too. Like, tomorrow might be amazing. Right? Right? It probably won't be, but it might be. Then wrapping it up, he says, get rid of all bitterness, rage and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as Christ God forgave you. One of the things that frightens me about dealing with the hurt people that we're trying to get through to is that hurt people hurt people. And it's very easy to become like them. And so these verses have to do with the attitudes that lurk beneath the surface of all our relationships and of all our frustrated attempts at communication. Let me just tell you what the words mean. The word bitterness in this sentence describes a smouldering resentment towards another person. Someone does something to you and you don't like it, and it arouses an emotion within you, and that emotion just sits there below the surface and it grows and it grows. Bitter people, after all, are always bitter for a reason, and the reason's usually legitimate, and yet regardless of how legitimate the reason, it is always described negatively in the Bible, because your bitterness towards that person isn't affecting the other person as much as it's affecting you. To understand that, you're the one who's being eaten up. You're allowing their dysfunction and damage to spoil your life. Bitter people are like archaeologists. They keep poking around in the past to no end. The words rage and anger can be distinguished from one another in that rage describes the passion of the moment, whereas anger describes a long-standing feeling of hatred. And these things can be hard to detect sometimes. You could have someone in your life right now and they absolutely hate you. You just don't know. You just don't know. I hope you're not living with them. Hey. The word brawling, interestingly, does not describe a fist fight, but rather an uncontrolled, resentful chatter. Brawling, biblically, is what happens when you phone him and he phones her, and you all get together over the internet and you whisper and you criticize and you use words negatively. And where does it get anyone? And the word slander in that regard is the use of words. The word slander in the Bible literally means to talk down. So slander is what happens when you speak to someone about someone else and you talk them down. And we're all guilty of this. And the Bible says we need to do better in this regard and stop. And in typical fashion, notice that the Bible does not advise attending a seminar or going for therapy to deal with any of these issues. The Bible simply and correctively says, hey, stop it. Yeah? Just get rid of those things. Those things that are holding you back and holding you down and spoiling your life and that just aren't right. Unzip your head. Step out and live differently. That's all. Now, getting back to our subject of listening and of being more interested than interesting. What I want you to notice in these sentences is the direction of the flow. One another. Each other. The Bible, from beginning to end, wants you to dig deep and make your Christianity not about yourself, but about other people. Not just because it's Christian, and not just because it makes scientific sense. We spoke about that in week 1. Because it's right. Being selfish is the antithesis of everything that we believe. Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, one of the biggest business-selling books of all time, he's pretty interesting. So his book was translated into 35 languages. He earns, I think, $1 zillion a speech. And he climbed El Capitan. Pretty interesting. In a recent article in Business 2.0, he said, "My golden rule is not to tell people how interesting I am." He said this. He said, if you want to have an interesting dinner conversation, be interested. If you want to have interesting things to write, be interested. If you want to meet interesting people, be interested in the people you meet. Everyone's interesting one way or another. You just have to ask enough questions until you get there. Be interested in their lives, in their story, what they want, what they need, what they're after. And the only way to be more interested is in to spend more time listening to them than in you are trying to impress them. In week 1 of this series, we spoke about a now well-known scientific phenomenon called mirror neurons in our brain. So just to recap, not all that long ago, scientists working at the University of Parma in Italy were studying the brains of monkeys. And they noticed that when a monkey threw a ball or ate a banana, certain neurons in their brain fired. No surprise. But they also noticed that when a monkey watched another monkey throwing a ball or eating a banana, those same neurons in the brain fired. Subsequent research on this discovered a part of the human brain that we now think makes it possible for us to feel empathy. And in our modern world, scientists are talking about what's called a mirror neuron gap. In a nutshell, we give ourselves out every day, doing our best, trying our hardest. And as we give ourselves out every day, we are screaming for someone, for anyone, to notice us, to reflect us, to say, hey, I see you. I understand you. I feel you. I hear you. This is an aching gap in our modern life. As we respond to someone else's needs and efforts and desires, we narrow this mirror neuron gap in the brain. It's just biology. And the more we do that, the more the other person is wired to notice you in return. Empathy creates empathy. So to be interesting, forget about being interesting, just instead be interested. Let me explain it in a simpler way. Imagine it's Christmas time. And if you're anything like me, at Christmas time you get these newsletters from friends you haven't heard from since last Christmas time. They're actually quite nice. Do you know those newsletters like, hi, we went, on holiday here and the kids are doing this. But do you know the kind of thing I mean? Good. Okay. So, you get 2 of these. Let me tell you about both of them. The first one is from an old friend. It says this: Bob and I took the family to Machu Picchu this year. Amazing. Now we're into ballroom dancing and artisanal bread making. Call us crazy, but we just weren't busy enough with all the many charity works we do. Oh, Bob just became the youngest VP in his company's history. Jessie, her soccer team took first place in the provincial soccer tournament, and Brandy, our other daughter, bless her heart, she got a scholarship to Harvard. Hope you're fine. Love to catch up next time we have free time. Then you get another one from another friend. Hey, how's it going? Thought of you the other day when we spotted an old beat-up Honda Civic, just like the one you used to drive in college. What did you ever do with that wreck, and how did you get so many dates driving it? Anyway, hope to swing through town one day next month and take you out for lunch. We'd love to catch up and hear about how things are with you. Did your daughter get into drama school yet? Can't wait to see her on Broadway one day. Things are okay for us, still working too hard, earning too little, but having fun anyway. Happy holidays, bro. Miss you. Now the first card, that wins the interesting game, hands down. Whoever those people are, they're far more interesting. It's no contest. They've got money, they're smart, they're well-travelled, they've got fascinating hobbies and interests. Cool people. The second card, that's not interesting at all. In the interesting game, they should lose. But they don't. They win. Am I right in saying you'd rather go out with the person who wrote you the second card than the first? Yeah? And I don't need to explain why, do I? The same is true when you talk to another person in person. The more you try to convince them that you're interesting, the more boring you become. I don't care how interesting you are. I don't care if you're Elon Musk. If you sit down with me for dinner, Mr. Musk, and spend an hour talking to me about you, I'm eventually going to zone out. The more you want to get through to people, the more sincere in them your interest needs to be. This isn't just good manners, and it's not just science, it's Christianity. You are to be for others more than you are to be for yourself. So take an interest, for goodness sake, a genuine interest in where that person's at. what they want, what they need, what they're after. Ask questions. Ask some more questions. Listen some more. And the more you listen, the more you'll be heard. Next Sunday I'll talk to you about why there's some people in your life you absolutely shouldn't listen to, which will undo everything I said this morning. Thank you for coming. God bless you. See you next week.